And we are live. Hello, everyone. I'm Josh Gilliland, one of the founding attorneys of the Legal Geeks. With me is Thomas Harper, and we're going to talk about the Book of Boba Fett, the Return of the Mandalorian, and let's just say I'm ready to rock. So,
how heavy is that right now? Is it getting heavier the longer you hold it?
yeah, it is the heaviest FX lightsaber I have because the hilt is weighty. Like it's made with genuine steel, so it's yeah, there's
It's a special Beskar there.
exactly. It is the coolest of the FX ones.
Yeah, that's
And
awesome.
yeah, and the detachable blade because they figure people are gonna cosplay with it and want the hilt.
Yeah.
So yeah, it came with a little tool set. That
I like
said,
it.
yeah, it's glorious. I need to get a wall mount for it. But that's a great opening because this episode was nothing I expected.
No, I don't think. I think it caught everybody knew that Din was coming back in. I don't think we expected to get a full, 45 or 45, 46 minutes ish of Din. Not complaining,
No,
but
it's reminiscent of how comic books are read, that you can have this massive side story take up an entire issue.
yeah.
Or as one group described it, chapters in a book, that you can have
Mhm.
that side quest with a different character that's the protagonist for a chapter. This is what we got. And boy, howdy, was it impressive to see a all those butchers get butchered. Wow. It's so Ring World has a meat packing district, and wow, just out of the gate, big bounty hunting issue. The guy skipped out on a debt. Problematic because we have unfair debt collecting,
Mhm.
and defaulting on a loan doesn't end with you dying. Like this looks more like a mob hit as opposed to your student loans weren't repaid, thus
Yeah.
we're going to garnish your wages, or you have a tax bill and something like that's happening. Instead, it's I can bring you in warm or bring you in cold for a loan default.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and
Super.
what's truly funny here, and this I say like funny with heavy air quotes around it. The business of debt collection is uh, among one of the heaviest regulated areas that exist for good reason, because so many times in our own history here in the U.S. and it still happens from time to time, but people get pretty abusive when it comes to getting money back that they're owed. And what's funny is Din is here wielding the dark saber to collect on this debt, like going to the far extreme of the violence spectrum. In real world, there are so many rules about what a debt collector can and can't do in just contacting you. Here in Pennsylvania, they can't, if they leave you a voicemail, they can't identify themselves as a debt collector on the voicemail, to avoid a situation where somebody might listen to that and it causes a whole issue. Um, and so, the irony here is that not only do many other third, fourth, fifth parties get to know about this debt, but he gets cleaved in half over it.
And beheaded. So
Yeah.
this is wrong on so many levels, because it's one thing to uh, go like, okay, we can't call people at work to collect a debt. Like
Right.
it's so regulated on, like, they're not sending you emails on your work email. Like we have all these rules in place to avoid people being harassed or abused. And this goes way beyond the Chicago way of collecting debt. And what's weird is, yeah, if it was like enforcing a judgment, like if there was a default judgment in place, you don't get to murder the guy. Now, self-defense is still an issue, but there's a question on, is Din the aggressor? And that's a little hard to tell because he shows up fully armed. Blasters, knife, spear, the dark saber, was it whistling birds? I'm like, there's all kinds of weapons that he has at this guy's business. Like that could be seen as aggression. On the flip side, if there was an arrest warrant for the debt, which again is problematic on so many levels for enforcing a judgment, where do you even start with that? Now to be fair, one of the henchmen bites Din's hand first. So
like rapidly.
Yeah, it's like, I think this might be the first time we've seen a human-sized person do biting in Star Wars. Not 100%, but it's like I don't remember biting being a thing besides like a
other than a Wookiee. Yeah, Kersentin did it in the last episode, but this was like very dog-like.
Yeah, because these guys look like breeds of dogs to a degree. So I mean, it turns into self-defense pretty quickly, but it doesn't change the fact that this reeks of like a mob hit to collect a debt, which ultimately Din just uses the head to get information so someone else can collect on the bounty, which consists of the victim's head. This is the good guy.
Yeah.
And it is really weird and uncomfortable when you think about it, because it's a brilliant fight. I mean, just from the Star Warsy aspect of it, the fight is outstanding and choreographed well, and it's well lit. Bryce Dallas Howard knows how to direct action.
Yeah.
But he beheads a dude because he didn't repay a loan.
What's interesting, if you go back and think about season 1 of The Mandalorian, it was almost like those bounties that were on the table. He's talking to Grief Karga, and they're talking about grabbing, going to pick up bail jumpers, like very traditional crimes that bounty hunters in the real world exist to help police in a way, police with a little p. They function in this quasi judicial role where they go out and help bring these folks in so that they can face the justice system, not kill them or whatever. And at least in that role, while lethal force was on the table for Din, there existed this like legitimacy about the missions that he was going on. And you had all of this against the backdrop of the code of the Bounty Hunters Guild, right? There are certain types of jobs that were off limits, that sort of thing. And here, this seems very different, although he does have a puck, right? So he has a very similar bounty puck, which seems to suggest that this is a guild job. But I don't know that we've seen a debt collection job like this. But remind me not to take out a loan from whoever that Ishi Tib was, because I'm not trying to get cleaved in half by the Darksaber.
Yeah, that was pretty brutal. And so unfair debt collection to a whole new level.
Yeah.
Now we see something fun with augmented reality markers. Have you played with augmented reality at all?
I have not. No, not other than just like little AR, like apps on the phone with different stuff.
That's what I was thinking, because there are different apps where you can see markers places. And I've never played Pokemon Go, but could be similar to
Yeah.
that. There are others. I came really close to doing it on a scout event on the USS Hornet, but ran out of time because I thought it'd be cool for, you scan and you see things. That's how we find the other Mandalorians. Great. It's not littering. It's not, they're not defacing anything when they do it because it's virtual and not there and only visible if you have the special goggles or visor to see it. So I thought that was a neat little effect that they have. But we learned a lot about the Mandalorians. And the thing that immediately came to mind was, are they squatters? Are they renting this place? Or are they just down in the bowels of this ring world, which we'll talk about that in a minute. But are they just tapping into power sources?
Yeah.
Is this adverse possession of some kind, or are they just squatters? Did you have any thoughts on this?
So I thought it was the fact that only 2 survived that assault on Navarro sort of put a fine point on how devastating that was for the covert. But if it's adverse possession, they've got a ways to go. Even I don't think whole lot of time has passed between Navarro and this episode. And at least in Pennsylvania, so when we talk adverse possession, just to back out, we're talking the ability for somebody that doesn't own a piece of property, so a trespasser, to become the legal owner of that property through this weird legal quirk called adverse possession. You sometimes hear it called squatters' rights, that sort of thing. But the thing about it is, in most places, it takes a long time and some very particular requirements to be able to claim, like rightfully claim adverse possession. Pennsylvania is 21 years. 21 years you have to be in hostile, open possession of the property. So meaning you can't be secretly like hidden in a hole or something like that, and you pop out after 21 years and say it. But for that period of time, you've got to be openly occupying that piece of property without any right to it. So open, notorious. These are the types of descriptors that have to be met. And it's hard to say. I mean, they've got a long way to go, probably another 20 and a half years if we're using Pennsylvania law to live down there. But the whole point is we don't want people trespassing and just like squatting and claiming property. That's the reason why you have to occupy for so long. So I also don't know how open and notorious their occupation of these like lower bowels are, because you've got to use augmented reality or the sort of thermal signals to actually find your way to the covert. They're very well hidden. I don't think they're going to meet the standard here, but even if they did, they got a long time to exist down there.
Yeah, different states have different levels, whether it's 5 years or 7. 21 is playing for keeps.
Yeah. No squatters in Pennsylvania.
No, and they don't meet that at all. So that it's like a form of trespass that we have with who owns that? Is this just like it's not negative space? There's plumbing, there's all the guts for the ring world that's down there. So they're not in a place meant for human habitation. And they've made it a home. And they plan to recruit. So wowzers, that's super weird.
I actually don't know. So if this is private property, you could have adverse possession. But if it's owned by whatever governmental entity runs this ring world, I don't know if you can get adverse possession from the government.
I don't think you can. That's like the crazy people up in Oregon who were, having their cattle on government land. But we don't know the nature of this ring world.
Sure.
And I did a little research. There are different ring worlds in sci-fi. So if it is around a star, that would be the full-on ring world that from the book of said name. There are smaller ones that it's not around a star, if it's like just a really big space station, there are different levels of it. You can see light from a star. So it's orbiting something, but the issue is the star in the middle, or is it, how is this thing configured? But this is the first time we've seen a really high concept sci-fi idea appear in Star Wars in a meaningful way. That's normally in Star Trek or Babylon 5 or
Yeah.
other sci-fi type shows. The space opera doesn't normally go there.
Yeah.
And the case in point is when they're putting the Starfighter together, we have a bunch of gobbledygook terms that
Yeah.
don't seem to have any basis in reality. Like if you discuss warp drive in Star Trek, they're trying to make it fit physics.
Right.
They're not even pretending to do that. They're just using terms. So bully for them for doing Ringworld and
Yeah.
with a real budget, and it looks cool. So well done, kids.
Very Halo-esque, I thought. Looked good.
Exactly. And that trailer, but that's something we can talk about in the future. So moving on, let's explain why the Night of a Thousand Tears was a war crime, not if. You want to take a stab at that?
Yeah. I thought this whole sequence, it was like a flashback within a flashback, depends on how you look at this whole episode, but really, really fascinating. I could have done with an entire episode on the Night of a Thousand Tears, just like documentary style going over it. But we've heard about this. It's sort of the downfall of Mandalore under the Empire. The Empire brings its fist down upon Mandalore finally, and now we've for the first time seen what happened. At least a peek of it. You got this swarm of TIE bombers bombing and just obliterating Sundari, which is the capital city in the dome that you see explode, and then in the aftermath, KX series droids like K2SO just combing through the wreckage and presumably shooting survivors. So, generally speaking, when let's just take Sundari because if you're familiar, if you've watched Rebels, or you're familiar based on the Clone Wars or some other source, Mandalore as a whole is a pretty barren planet because of the huge number of wars going back millennia. They have pretty much wiped out all normal life. So Sundari is a dome because it is very difficult to survive outside that dome. But Sundari is, at least as of the Clone Wars Rebels time, it's populated by a lot of civilians. The Mandalorians, while their history is as a warrior culture and it's steeped in combat and stuff, the actual people that live in, that's long history. But the people that live and work in that dome for the most part are civilians, and Mandalore, um, at least what we've seen of it on screen, they've turned to largely pacifist ways, and I know that some of that changed. Certain sects changed that in Star Wars Rebels, but the point is that there was no distinction made by the Empire during that assault based on civilian or military target. And that's sort of one of the core fundamental principles of the law of armed conflict. You have to distinguish between civilian targets and military targets. And mixed in with that is while the law of armed conflict it acknowledges the fact that civilians can and will die in war. That happens. That's allowable. A strike against a valid military target has to be proportional and it has to be necessary. And it's just hard to see any world in which the utter destruction of a city in that way was either militarily necessary or proportional in nature, because it and then I juxtapose that with the cleanup operation on the back end, where it very much seemed like nobody was left to survive. And in fact, if you take the armorer's comments, really the only people that survived all of this were those that weren't on planet or as the armorer's covert was, they were cloistered off-world Concordia. You pick your other destination. So this was a targeted genocide, a major war crime. You can't indiscriminately target civilians, and you can't. It goes without saying, but you cannot target um, people based on their ethnicity, their religion, a people, and attempt to wipe them out. That's sort of the king of all war crimes.
And
So, yeah, very emotional scene for as short as it was.
and there, let's compare it and explain how it's different to firebombing of Dresden or the firebombing
Mhm.
of Tokyo. And in World War II, total war had erupted because part of the proportionality analysis is if one side's already targeted civilians, you're now fair game. And in Dresden, granted, there's still ugly debate over this, but the Allies targeted Dresden, and part of the argument was this was supposed to be the fallback capital of the Third Reich, and they wanted to rob them of the governance capability, and as the war was raging. There are people who disagree with that, and Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse Five is part of that since he survived the firebombing of Dresden. Compared to Tokyo, the Imperial Japanese Army and Navy targeted civilians. Look at what happened in the Philippines, what happened across China. The Japanese war crimes that took place were horrific. So their civilians, Tokyo was fair game. It was also the capital. There's a little bit of victor's justice here because, but that's the argument for you did it first. You now have a target on you. The same is not said of Mandalore. Now, the questions that I have are part timing. So we know Rebels and the events of season 4
Mhm.
are 3 or 4 years before the Battle of Yavin. So it's close, but not there yet, where Sabine gives Bo-Katan the Darksaber. Now,
Mhm.
we don't know what happens after that. We don't know how Moff Gideon fights Katan and gets the Darksaber because he wins it from her in combat. And then we have a massive bombing campaign on Mandalore itself. Very large conventional weapons can make mushroom clouds. When the Japanese battleship Yamato was finally sunk, uh, they hit the battery, and so when that ship exploded, a mushroom cloud came up. There are many other examples of non-nuclear weapons leaving mushroom clouds. On the flip side, there are tactical nukes, and those do leave mushroom clouds. We can't tell what the Empire used in the bombing campaign, whether they were large conventional weapons or small nuclear weapons. But nukes would point to sending in droids as opposed to stormtroopers. On the
Mhm.
flip side, the heat probably would have been enough to eliminate the possibility of human beings
Yeah.
going in for the cleanup operation. But either way, this is just a war crime to high heaven.
Yeah, and what's interesting here is the Empire certainly can muster a lot of firepower. I mean, look at Bad Batch and the destruction of Tipoca City. That was 2 3 star destroyer. Those were Venators, but low orbit turbo laser strike. That can certainly get the job done. This was a statement operation to make sure that not a single Mandalorian made it out alive. And if it came to bringing those like Moff Gideon justice for this sort of thing, um not only I think the scale is on the far end. I think the armorer said millions are dead because of him. But you look at the conduct of the operation. I mean, you don't send that many bombers into battle. You don't send a cleanup crew of like assassin droids in if this is just a standard military operation to say, hey, we need to hit some of their weapons producing facilities, or maybe hit their airfields, this or that. This was a genocide, and there's nothing else to it.
That to arrival power, because part of the
Yeah.
statement was thinking. I haven't watched those episodes of Rebels for a while, but we had sects that were collaborating with the Empire,
Mhm.
and they had a puppet government in there. But there were other moons and families with ruling capability that weren't on board with the Empire, and it's worth revisiting to
Mhm.
get into that history. But the Empire could clearly see this as a threat and want to make the statement of, we're going to kill all of you. But I do wonder, when was this done? Was it pre-Yavin? Was it post-Yavin? How, like, where was it in the war? Was it like a last gasp sometimes before the Battle of Endor? Or was it, where was this in the timeline?
Mhm.
And it doesn't change the fact that we could do a bitchin' war crimes trial of Moff Gideon, and boy, howdy, do I want to, because we now have enough facts to pull this off,
Yes.
and I'm sure we'll get more. The fact they talked about a tribunal, this was just one thing that he did.
Yeah.
There's more, uh, but
Well, we did find out. I mean, this is an interesting sort of extension off of this. We find out what happened to him. He was turned over to New Republic authorities. I was really hoping that Din would have taken possession of that light cruiser and just like that's his ship now. But I guess that got turned over as well. And there's mention of he gets questioned by Paz and by Paz Vizsla about why he didn't just execute him. And he says, well, he's going to face the New Republic Tribunal. They'll probably execute him. So even 5 years after the Battle of Endor and the ultimate fall, probably 4 years after the fall of the Empire, officially, you still have the tribunal operational, probably because the Imperial remnant still exists, and those folks are treated as war criminals. Um, so it's been known that the tribunal has existed. That's been mentioned in like book materials. Really, really cool to hear it said out loud, especially with disdain.
well, I wouldn't call it disdain, but they're
Well, from
under the,
Paz, from
yeah.
Paz at least.
Again, he's in the Robert Taft, we just take him behind
Yeah,
the barn
yeah.
camp. I, I'm much more in the
What's due
Justice.
process?
Yeah, yeah. I prefer the Justice Jackson approach.
Right.
That said, uh, the war crimes trials of the Nazis went on up until basically the Berlin airlifts,
Yeah.
and we stopped that because the Cold War became the issue. And there was also the horror and the realization we would need to prosecute everyone in Germany. And that would become problematic, especially dealing with the Soviets. I'm also of the mindset we didn't do it enough for Imperial Japanese officers because of the atrocities they did. That said, Star Wars is different because there's an active Imperial remnant, and which would be just different historically from what we can compare it to. So lots to talk about, and I promise anyone listening, we will do this as a mock trial. I don't know where, I don't know when, but we will. So we then get into dueling. We don't allow that anymore. Too many people died. And like occasionally I'll see on Facebook from the Naval Institute, like when dueling was banned in the Navy, which was its own thing before the federal government banned it overall, because we can't have people taking pot shots at each other. And when there's only 3 people left in your exclusive secret club, maybe dueling's not the best way to solve your disputes. And it also just really strikes that the Vislas are genetically schmucks, that it's bred into them. Gillilands are high strung and hardworking. We got that going on. but to go like you're genetically a jerk is pretty astounding to see with the Vizsla characters. Anyway, any comments on the duel?
I like that they set aside their jetpacks right after we see Din get knocked off and use it to save himself, but it's sort of up the ante there. But yeah, I mean, dueling is still legal in some parts of the world. I mean, the Afghan tribal areas jump to my mind as a play. I don't know how, I couldn't tell you how often that sort of thing happens, but as a way of resolving irreconcilable differences, there's some parts of the world where that's still a thing, and I like that, you know, they very intentionally named Paz Vizsla. He has a very prominent last name there, and a name with a lot of weight when it comes to the Mandalorians. And so I like that this has come to a head, and their beef from season one has come full circle and now involves family lines and one of the most important symbols to the Mandalorian people in the Darksaber. I thought it was fascinating. We don't need to go in the rabbit hole about the lore of the Darksaber and the weight, you know, the problems that they were both having wielding it. But I thought that was a fascinating wrinkle on the whole thing.
That, and I wouldn't be surprised if that was Jon Favreau's voice, but that's just
Oh, it definitely is. Yeah.
Because he's not listed in the credits, or if he is, I didn't see his name. So
Yeah. Oh, I'm
but,
sure it is.
yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it was him in the armor, but who wouldn't want to play dress up?
Yeah,
we
right.
then learn commercial flights. You got to check your weapons.
Even if your religion calls for you to carry every weapon known to the galaxy.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. This, like, if you watch any of the old airport movies, like Airport 77 or Airport 75, you know, it's laughable how the security measures were in the 1970s versus post 9/11.
Right.
You know, Din kept his helmet on. He didn't have to take off his shoes, but there is that weapon detector that they have to go through, and he has to check everything, and he gets a little baggage card because we just don't tolerate that. And so anyway, but there were no bag inspections. It was, again, a little more reminiscent of the 70s with how we did security than it is of the 21st century, which probably fits the Star Wars motif of feeling very 1970s still.
Yeah, yeah. This was one of the I thought the parts where the direction really paid off in spades. It was just like the moment where all you can see is all of his weapons going in. He's pulling stuff out of every nook and cranny on his uniform. He unspools his whip cable there. So it was that was one of my favorite parts. And he's like, he makes the comment like, I know everything that's in there.
You have a good comment from Aaron about the religious exceptions, India and Canada. And also in the UK to a degree. So that is fascinating.
Yeah.
But
The funny thing here is that the droid seems to not have been programmed at all with any not a capacity to understand the possibility for an exemption, but the authority to grant the exemption. So he offers him the opportunity to make his case. So it's possible that Starliner Cruises or whatever, I forget the name of the carrier there. It's possible that they would allow for it, but he didn't do any of the pre-planning for it. So you can't be arguing with the gate agent over religion and hope that you can board the same flight. You gotta be flexible in your travel plans if you're gonna pull that card.
yeah, and where would he stay? So he made the right call of like, I'm getting out of Ringworld. So we get to Tatooine and we visit our favorite mechanic, and we got the BD droid. They're just teasing if it's BD1 or not. And we have the fact that there was a contract of sorts for a replacement for the Razer Crest. That's why our hero goes to Tatooine. He thinks he's getting a replacement for the Razer Crest, and it is. But it's this is where language matters.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a replacement Razer Crest or is it a replacement for the Razer Crest? Very different meaning here, and it's the replacement of the vehicle, not, or excuse me, for the vehicle, not of the vehicle, which can get very confusing. But the fact that we see some prequel love here, because we haven't seen one of these ships since Attack of the Clones, and sure, there's the comics where they've appeared, but we then there are all kinds of rules that come from with souping up cars, and then registering your hot rod, and whether or not if you put the giant tires on your truck, you can still get insurance for it. So there's all kinds of rules here. But I saw this as there's the contract element to it for I'm going to sell you this N1 Starfighter. We have to put it together, so some assembly required. But it's kind of a love letter to George Lucas, who was very into cars and hot rods, with that American graffiti feel to it, that giving it what looks like, which be under the hood of a Mustang with a 302 engine, compared to like a Star Wars ship. So that was just a nice love letter to, I think, to Lucas. Did you have any thoughts on the offer for the vehicle?
Yeah, I thought she was going to uncover a pod racer at first and just be like, well, I can't get you off world, but you'll be able to zoom around here really, really fast. When you talk street legal, there are regulations about what you can drive around the streets, right? There's a reason why ATVs and random like certain dune buggies and stuff aren't allowed on the streets, and it's all based in safety, right? The government has a legitimate interest in ensuring that roadways, which are dangerous places as is, are occupied by vehicles that are safe to do so. And really that comes down to being what they call roadworthy, right? So specific signal lights and lighting, safety equipment, sort of the basics that you would expect to have on a car, that you would not die instantly in if it crashed. The street mods that this has, or the speed mods that this has, I don't know that would render it not street legal. The question that comes up, and I know we're going to touch on this toward the end of the episode here in a minute, is how this, or the lack of registration that this vehicle has. The whole point of why Din actually accepts this ship is A, because it's fast, like fast as hell, and B, because it's pre-Empire, very much like the Razer Crest, that is off books, right? Nobody knows this thing exists. Hard to track, hard to know. It maintains the element of surprise, and theoretically stays out of any, in this case, New Republic entanglements. That wouldn't make the difference between whether something is street legal or not, but it would make the difference between whether he could lawfully operate that vehicle without fear of being immediately stopped by X-Wings.
You can't have the drag racer in your garage and take it for a spin around the block. Like there's a place to do that.
They're very fast. I mean, speed alone or speed modifications I don't know of any law that makes just a fast car, just by virtue of it being fast, not street legal. Now, like a drag racer that requires a parachute to deploy, that the kind of thing you see in the NHRA, sure. But there are some very fast vehicles available on the market, and speed has nothing to do with any of that. So Pelimato on that front, she's not getting him into any hot water. But
now, to divert from the car,
All the stolen parts might be different.
That's knowing the Jawas are stealing from the Pikes. That's problematic. The Jawas acquire, yeah, that's theft. It's hot. There's bad mojo. Bad mojo. Now we do have an issue. It's a plane. It flies. We have rules on airplanes. You can't go get in your Cessna and fly at 200 feet following the I-5 down to LA from San Francisco. You can't do that. There are minimum height requirements. Now, in the world of Star Wars, things get a little smushy because it's different. So you have this area that's clearly for ships to land in. So he takes off and he flies, but he's kind of low for going that speed. So there could be an issue with, it's like he's way under 500 feet and he's punching it to see how fast it can go through Baker's Canyon when he eventually gets there. Also, Baker's Canyon looks like there are homes carved into the walls. So it's a residential area in places. So that's way above the speed limit for a residential area, which is 25 in the United States. And again, we don't allow low flying aircraft to go through neighborhoods as well. So it's problematic. So, but
although if you bought a house along the Boonta Eve pod racing circuit, granted, I don't know that it's still in use, but I feel like you've walked into a certain amount of risk.
Yeah, when you get your house near the airport or by the racetrack, you should expect that noise to happen because it's like you knew what it was used for.
What's that across the street there? Oh, that's Daytona.
Yeah, it's like you would pick up on that real quick if you're by a racetrack. That's it.
What's funny, what I say that like half jokingly, but I live near the Pocono Speedway in Pennsylvania, so it's about an hour north of me. Very big oval track that NASCAR races here a couple times a year, and there's a residential area right across the street. I mean, it is in the sticks, and there's nothing really around it, but right across the street from it is a big residential area. So, and homes that were built since that racetrack has existed.
Yeah, you know what you're getting into. You can't complain. Like I'm near a National Guard base, so we'll hear Reveille playing and all that stuff. It's like part of the deal. We know that's what they do. But we then go buzz a commercial flight. That's a no-no. We don't allow, if you have your P-51 that's vintage, you don't go fly around a 737 as it's taking off. Like you just don't do that. So having law enforcement show up is not a surprise because the captain of that Starliner probably called it in with like, we got a souped up N1 starfighter flying around. I'm not okay with this because we just don't do that here. So, but this is what starts turning into a police stop, and which is fascinating because he clearly had a moving violation. And so they have, a reasonable suspicion, if not outright probable cause, if they actually witnessed it, to detain him, to go like, dude, what's up here? And he is truthful with like, I got carried away. We just built it. And that almost worked with okay, don't do that again. Go take care of everything. But when we get into the real questions about Navarro and the Imperial Remnant, he decides to outrun the cops. Don't try this in real life. And lots of problems there. Because I really do think that the older X-Wing pilot is appreciative. I don't think it's like, we want to bring you in because you took care of the space Nazis for us. Like that's a thank you. So We appreciate your help. So, but again, them choosing not to do the paperwork, that's problematic. So,
When this is so Din kind of lays out an important warning for those that are operating, maybe below the standard of the law, or involved in nefarious actions. Be careful sort of how you're driving around, right? Because it is very, very easy to give police a lawful reason to stop you. So not only does he have a moving violation, but as soon as they, in effect, run his plates, run his registration, they realize he's not registered. Doesn't have the appropriate transponder, which it sounds like the Star Wars equivalent of like a VIN code, or your VIN number. Although that's redundant, just your VIN on your car, and all reasons that are kind of adding up to give the I assume they're Rangers, the New Republic Rangers, their reason to stop him, and in fact they attempt to take over control of his ship and park him on it, and then that opens Din up to quite a few dangers given his line of work and what he's been involved in, because it's going to be really impossible for Din to argue that a traffic stop there is unreasonable or is unjustified. There's no pretext to this stop. He did some wrong stuff. It'd be like if you rolled through a stop sign, you can't complain that the officer stopped you and then happened to find all the illegal things that you had going on in your car. The you know the stop was justified. You see this lots of times in the real world. Um, Small moving violations, a failure to signal, some of this stuff you cross into the sticky business of pretextual stops. Um, but you know, the bottom line, that the common denominator here is even a small offense, small to you and me, small under in terms of the punishment, that's all a police officer needs to stop you and potentially conduct a search. So he just happens to have that handy dandy button to get out of it.
yeah, and still land back on Tatooine.
I
So,
love that it was so fast that it was mistaken for a jump to hyperspace.
yes. And it's also curious to note that there's cloud cover on Tatooine, which does mean moisture.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a neat thing to notice. We then get back to a contract situation with FedEx Shan with a will you work for us for this money? So we have offer,
Hmm.
consideration, come on board, and we have I'll do it for free. And okay, so kind of a different contract formation that he's taking it pro bono, but
Hmm.
still interesting nevertheless.
Still the same sort of mushy terms that we dealt with last week with Fennec, where there's no real time. Din doesn't know anything basically other than the rough sketch of what Boba's after and the fact that it's Boba asking.
He doesn't know it's we're going to war with the Pikes. They've invaded,
Yeah.
so he does know there's a problem with the Pikes.
Hmm.
And we also heard that law enforcement won't do anything, which raises the question: what law enforcement? Are we
Yeah.
talking the New Republic is not doing searches of ships? Is it the mods that are supposed to be doing this? Like, who's the law enforcement
Hmm.
in the story? Uh, those who work for the mayor, like, but no, this is now Mos
Yeah.
Eisley, so it's not Mos Espa, so it's a different political situation. So lots of
Hmm.
unanswered questions there.
Yeah, and it does beg. I still think that even the bit about the Pikes that we got here, which is they're causing trouble. Pelly describes them as having really probably. She just almost describes it as if they brought the spice trade to Tatooine, but I don't think that's I think they've probably colored outside the lines of whatever system Jabba had in place. But clearly they've ramped things up in terms of that illicit trade on the planet. I still think there is a bigger bad here in play than just the Pikes that are scaring off even law enforcement. And I took it as, potentially a New Republic issue as well. They've clearly got limited resources. Poor Carson Teva and his rookie wingman there can't do a whole lot in spite of their skills. So, and the New Republic is stretched thin. They've got even at this point in galactic history, they're still trying to get their feet under them and really cement their legitimacy as the governing body of the galaxy, and taking down a massive crime syndicate perhaps isn't at the top of the priority scale.
Agreed. Then raises us to the last question of, first I have to see a little friend. There's no legal analysis here. He wants to, this is just nerds feeling giddy about, do we get to see Luke Skywalker and Grogu in Book of Boba Fett?
It's parents' weekend. It's parents' weekend at the Jedi Academy, so he's got to.
It's curious. So I'm cautiously optimistic that we get a cameo. I would love if Sebastian Stan takes on the mantle of playing Luke now. That would be pretty cool. Would Luke want to go help? Because, hey, I grew up there. What do you mean drug runners are now there? Like that could be a Jedi thing to get involved with. For we're supposed to bring peace. Drug lords are not peaceful, so this could be something that a Jedi would want to intercede. Saying hi and dropping off what I hope is chainmail for Grogu. Yeah. That's cool. That would make sense.
You can skewer me, or whoever's listening can skewer me for saying this. I kind of hope they just do a time jump. We've got 2 episodes left. I'm okay to wait in anticipation to see Grogu and that reunion in season 3, but bring us in episode 6, episode 7, and just show Din on the back end of that, having completed the task, and leave us wanting more on that front, and catch us up later.
That too works, just because there's only 2 episodes left.
Yeah, if we had 10, then I'd be all for it. But
then the side quest makes sense. But if he goes and visits, cool.
Yeah.
Then the question turns into, do we get to see anybody else? And we've speculated about this before, and I don't like speculation, but I think it's a good hope of, is there anyone else that we might get to see? And who would have a vested interest in lending a hand to either fight the Pikes or give Boba support? I don't know.
I wouldn't rule out another bounty hunter. The issue now becomes, unless it's just a recognizable character who's just going to sort of take a back seat, you've got only a limited amount of time. And now the room is crowded with personalities. You've got Fennec, who I don't want to see drop off. You've got Din now in the mix, and you've got Boba. If you start to add somebody that where people are going to want to hear them talk and interact, even a Bosk, for example, you got Black Chrysanthemum that's in there. So the room's a little crowded. I wouldn't mind seeing somebody that nobody expects to speak, like a Forlom or a Zuckuss. They're just there, and you're like, oh, that's awesome. But we've got a good core crew here. There's a lot of muscle that's been assembled. They need some foot soldiers, though, perhaps beyond the mods.
Agreed. They need people who are going to do heavy lifting, and on the flip side,
I like Embo would I would only want to see Embo. To Aaron's point, that's a great callback to the Clone Wars.
Who else? Again, I'd be happy if we see Tusken Raiders as the rank and
that's
file.
A good point. Yeah, I think we've not seen the last of that tribe, or no, what's left of it.
I don't think whoever struck the Tuskens got all of them. and there's still many tribes. So the idea of getting all the Tuscans to rally to go, we're going to get rid of the drug runners and everyone's going to live in a nice, happy, cooperative Tatooine. That's a good goal. Like, as opposed to we're just going to let everything go to hell. Having some stability and a functional government built upon equal protection and people being able to live their lives without fear of getting shot is the purpose of civil society. It's why we form governments. We want people to have life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This could be that.
They will have fear of getting eaten by that rancor, though.
You got it.
A little bit of fear.
There's the quote about you need laws with teeth. Well, there you go. He's,
big ones. Yeah.
You all taste like chicken to him. So don't screw up.
He's an emotionally complex creature.
Snuggly, or you could be a snack.
Yeah.
But the Tuscans. I agree with Cobb Vance.
Yeah.
Good call, Aaron. This is nice to have others live with us chatting, and Aaron from Ryloth being able to share their Ryloth relics, all their cool stuff. Being able to pitch in with Cobb Vance. Yeah, that would make sense. That town showing up. There are Tuscans there that we've now met. So you need like 1,000 of them if we're going to have anything of a real battle or show up in force. Just to, again, think of Quigley Down Under, when the native people show up to go like, get out. It's time for you to leave. We want that. We do want that with the Pikes. So, and they have now a history because of that rail train of just popping people off. So again, hope. I will share a hope that I have for Mando season 3, and that's finding foundlings is a lot like finding force-sensitive younglings. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see Mando hanging out with Luke, finding force-sensitive kids to take to Luke's academy. That would fit on so many levels, and it would be a good purpose for Mando, who wants to find a new family and someplace to belong. Of course, there's the track of go recapture Mandalore.
Yeah.
But I could see him finding force-sensitive youth and taking them to Luke, because it fits the Mandalorian creed and could be a good way to bridge the two. So, but it's wrong to speculate. That's how things can go to hell pretty quick. So, any thoughts on that for what we might see when Mando returns?
I think his destiny lies with Bo-Katan, either with or against her. I don't know how he'll end up aligning, but I think her inclusion was very purposeful. I think we've yet to see the last of the armorer. The fact that they give somebody like Paz Vizsla a name and we know his identity, we know at least his bloodline, but yet the armor remains shrouded in mystery. I firmly believe she's somebody that we've seen before. I really like the theory that she's Rook, one of the Mandalorians that we saw aligned with Maul. Her character goes all the way back to the Maul comic that the Dark Horse comic that got brought back into canon at the reset. So she's been around for a while. She played a fairly prominent role, was around for the split with Bo-Katan. So I tend to think there's some intentionality there, and there's been speculation that there might be a Bo-Katan type spinoff show. So we'll see, but we've not seen the last of retaking Mandalore and sort of reestablishing things. And we honestly don't know what it looks like right now. Obviously things got blown up and were very bad. I don't know what Mandalore right now, say 10-ish years after whatever happened to it 10, 15 years, what it looks like, if there's an Imperial remnant there. Seems like there's a fight to be had, though.
Yeah, it could be 25.
Son of
Like,
Dathomir, thank you.
yeah, it could be 25, and good call for Son of Dathomir. But again, it could be 25 that have passed. And did anyone go back to rebuild, or is it just a wasteland? That looks like, again, London after the Blitz. So, like, what is the situation there? I do think Mandalore will be part of the story, but we'll just see how it plays out. I could see multiple things happening, but we now know that there's rich story content, and they know how to throw curveballs that we didn't expect.
Yeah.
So
I'll tell you, the first thing that I do every episode, and I'll be doing this with a little bit of pain these last 2 episodes, I bring up the time of the episode and just check how much Star Wars I have ahead of me. So I'm really, really hoping that they're on the longer side these last 2 episodes as they wrap things up.
Probably. And again, theoretically, we're going to get a show a quarter this year, or close to it, if they do that type of release schedule, because we get Andor, Kenobi, and possibly Mando season 3. So we could get this quarterly. And the crossover prospects, I think, are for Mando and Boba high. But I wonder what we'll see with Andor would be alive at the same time the Kenobi series. And same for Kenobi and Andor, because they both die within several days of each other. So, so there's that. But they, again, you could see if Kenobi's 9 or 10 years after the Empire forms, he's got some gray. If it's 15 years, 5 before the Battle of Yavin, he'll have a lot more gray by the time of Andor. So there's crossover potential, showing kind of a connective universe. But we'll see if they do that or not. But anyway, everyone, for those who are on, any other legal questions or ideas you want to share?
We have pitched, I can reveal, I won't reveal details, but we have pitched several things for Star Wars Celebration. So fingers crossed. More to follow, though.
Yeah, we pitched 3. So we'll see what we get. And unless we got really creative, we could still pitch 1 by tomorrow. So
it's true. They stay open till tomorrow at midnight.
Yeah. So my rule is 3 or 4, and we pitch that. I'll say 2 straight panels, 1 mock trial. So we'll see if they engage on any of those.
Yeah.
And that would be super fun because we'll have a good time. And very, very much looking forward to seeing people in May in person. I think Omicron will have passed by then. I'm pretty sure we'll all have to wear masks. For those who haven't attended a show in California, what they did at San Diego Comic-Con Special Edition, everyone had their vaccination status checked. If you were vaccinated, you got 1 color wristband. If you were unvaccinated and you had proof of a negative test, you had a different color. And everyone had to wear masks, even panelists during the panels. And people tried to socially distance as well. We're mostly successful with the way that they spread out the exhibit hall. So I would expect something similar for Celebration and WonderCon as well. So that's my sense. But I'm glad it's May. I don't want to hop on an airplane right now, and I'm probably going to drive just to avoid air travel. So, but anyway, that's the future, and we got a couple months to look forward to that. So everyone who tuned in this evening, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoy the show, please leave a review wherever you listen on your podcast player of choice. We also have some extra content on Patreon, and we will be back. So, everyone, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay geeky.